Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today I'm on the other side of the camera because I'm going to be showing you guys how I make a simple macrame plant hanger. I absolutely love these. I think it's an incredible, easy, inexpensive DIY way to display your houseplants. I have these all over my home. I think it's a great way to save on surface space, and I've been making this exact type for a couple years now, so I'm quite accustomed to this method, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys because not only is it very easy, I don't think it looks half bad either. So what are you going to need for this project? Well, next to nothing really, but of course you're going to need rope first and foremost. So I'm using macrame cord today. I think this is 3mm macrame cord. I also love using jute rope, but you can really use any type of rope you have around your house as long as it's going to be sturdy enough to hang and hold the planter that you're going to need, which is the other thing you're going to need, a planter or pot that you are basing your hanger around. Of course, you're going to need scissors to cut your rope, and a measuring tape wouldn't hurt either, but you could, of course, also just measure with your eyes if that's okay with you. But if you want to get a little bit more specific, I'm going to share with you guys some simple measurements today. So to get started, you're going to need either 3 or 4 pieces of your rope. I'm going to use 3 today for expediency of showing you guys this tutorial, but you could use 4. If you use 3 pieces of rope, you're going to have a 3-sided macrame hanger, and if you use 4 pieces, you're of course going to have a 4-sided macrame hanger. So with 3 pieces, it's going to be a little bit more asymmetrical depending on the way you're looking at it, and then usually with 4 pieces, it's going to be very symmetrical. So these are 3 pieces that I have folded in half at the center. And to explain how I measured these, I like my macrame hangers to be roughly 32 to 36 inches. That's how I like them for the size pot that I'm going to be using today. And of course, since we are folding the rope in half, we are going to double that measurement. So let's say if I wanted to make my macrame hanger roughly 35 inches, I would double that to make sure I have at least 70 inches of rope, and also just to give me more leeway, I'd probably recommend adding an extra foot on. So today I'm working with roughly 80-inch pieces of rope that I have folded in half, so I have roughly 40 inches from the center to the bottom. And as I said, I folded them in half, and I have folded them over today a wreath hook. I think that's one of the easiest ways to do macrame in your home. There are plenty of ways you can do this. You could just do this over a doorknob if you don't have anything else. You could do this with a clothing rack. There's plenty of methods, but I just think a wreath hanger is a super practical, inexpensive way to do some macrame around your house. So we're starting with these 3 pieces of rope, and we're gonna have to make a loop up here. Now there's 2 ways you could do this. You could just take these pieces of rope and tie them in a knot, just like a simple knot that you would tie all together. I would take the whole thing around and put this through. But I think that looks a little messy, so I kind of like to do a different method. So we're going to do what they call a gathering knot, which is a super easy, not complicated at all, knot that we're going to tie. So I have a separate piece of rope right here. I just save my scraps pretty much always to do these gathering knots. And this piece of rope is, I'd say, roughly 2 feet. I always prefer to be working with extra rope when it comes to working with macrame because you can't add, but you can remove. So that's something to really keep in mind. So to do a gathering knot, it's very simple. We're going to take one end of our rope and we're going to make it into a loop like this. So I just have the rope and I have it in a loop, and I'm going to take it and put it up where I want it on my hanger. So I have it right here. So I have the loop going down, and I have the rope here, and I'm just going to start to wrap this rope around, holding it kind of tightly, and I'm going to leave this top piece sticking out the top, and we're going to just wrap the rope around our other ropes so that it's kind of, forming this just spiral knot, if you will. And that's just going to keep all of this together. I apologize for all of the creaking in advance that this wreath hanger is going to be making as I do all of this knot tying today. But this is really going to be the most complicated knot that we tie throughout this entire project. And it is not complicated at all. So I'm going to stop there, I think. So I have all of this extra loop right here. Maybe I'll go one more time. And so I have still this loop sticking out the bottom because we basically just tied this rope around the loop. I still have this piece sticking out the top, and we're going to take our leftover rope, and I'm just going to stick it through this loop right here. It's a little frayed. Okay. So then I'm going to take this top piece that we had, and I'm going to pull on it and you'll see it's pulling that loop up. So it's pulling that strand up inside. If I grab it in the correct way, it should just pull it up inside there. So what we have now is this gathering knot, but we still have these two pieces of rope that we're going to want to get rid of. So I typically will cut off the bottom one first, as close as I can. And you could take your scissors and kind of shove it up there, but I'll usually just give it a little bit more of a tug. Sometimes it's not really doing a difference, but this time is one of those times. But I'll just take the scissors this time. But sometimes you can pull on that rope and it'll kind of just pull it up. But, you know, if that doesn't work, you can just have your scissors handy. You don't even have to really, you know, be crazy about it. I'm just a little anal, so I like my things to look as perfect as they can and not have any of those imperfections showing. But I'm just gonna take my scissors to stuff it in there. So now we have this gathering knot. So this is how we're gonna start off doing this project. And like I said, this is pretty much the most complicated knot that we're going to be making throughout this project. So now we're gonna move down a little bit because we're gonna start tying the other types of knots. Just to show you guys how much exactly I'm moving down this rope from the very top where it's hanging, I'm probably gonna be working around this 18 to 20 mark. So just a heads up if you wanna be doing this a similar size as me, but like I said, this is really up to your preference on how low you would like to be hanging your macrame cords, so it's all up to you. But this is the part where we're going to start making the part that the planter is actually going to hang in. So this is a super simple way. There's no little spirals or crazy knots or anything like that. We're going to keep this super, super simple. So I'm going to take this rope, and you're going to notice that there's always going to be two pieces of rope that kind of naturally fall together. So you can see right here, I'm just kind of like separating this, almost as if with these three, as if I was about to start braiding, but we're not going to do that. We're going to just take one little segment of these two ropes that naturally fall together, and we are going to just simply tie them in a knot. So I'm just going to take it and tie it through. And we're gonna not tighten it completely quite yet because we wanna make sure that they're all going to be even as we make our way down. So I'm gonna work my way over to this other group of two right here. Tie them. And like I said, we're still gonna not quite pull them tight yet just because we wanna make sure that they are as even as possible, and it's kind of more difficult to change once it's tight. And this last one. All right, so they are roughly all together. So we're gonna just start to pull them tight. And I usually just like to do this together and then just kind of use my thumb, push up and make sure that they are all tight and snug. Alrighty, so we have these three together, just tied. And I'm going to move the camera down slightly, pardon me, as I adjust. So we are down here now. I feel like our lighting could possibly be a little bit better. Give me one moment. All right, that's much better. So we have our three knots at the top here that we just tied separately, but now we need to make them connect. So as you can see, just in the same way that there was two ropes that kind of fell right next to each other, there's going to be two knots up here that are going to be right next to each other. And we're going to put them together, and we're going to find that there are, once again, two ropes. Let me just focus that. There are once again two ropes in the center here that are falling right next to each other naturally. So I'm roughly about, I'd say, 4 or 5 inches down from these knots up here. And as you can see, so we're kind of connecting it like a V right here, kind of like netting, or if it's like, almost looks like you're starting to like make a hammock kind of pattern. So we're just going to, once again, tie that. And just like before, we're not going to completely tighten them just to save us from any error. And I'm just going to work my way over. So here I have these two that fall right next to each other. And this is, I feel like, the only part where you can kind of get like a little tangled up with your end product. If you don't do the ropes that fall right next to each other, it might be a little bit more like tangled up at the top where they just don't kind of completely fall into place, if that makes any sense. But you know, once again, it's not going to really affect your function. It just might affect the aesthetics. So last but not least, we have this last rope in the back here. So once I tie this one, we're going to have this kind of whole like netting pattern right here that can sort of catch a planter if you see, but of course we're going to have to do something about the bottom. But let me just go ahead and tie this one. All right, and they're looking pretty even. So once again, I'm just going to kind of pull a little tight and then just kind of push up with my thumbs to tighten them and make sure that they are even. You could absolutely tighten them separately if you wanted to, but I like to tighten them together just because I find that it keeps them much more even. If I tighten them separately, there'll be like one up here and one down here, and it's not completely even. And we like things to be uniform in this house, okay? I'm admitting it. Okay, so now we're gonna have to move down just a little bit more. So pardon me once again, as I just adjust the camera a little bit more. So what we have now is we're probably going to be about 3 or so inches underneath this macrame hanger, or sorry, the knots. So we're about 2 to 3 inches underneath these knots. And at this point, I could take my pot that I'm gonna be putting in here. I know we're a little close up, so perhaps I should move back just a little bit. We're doing this together. If you guys watch me on YouTube and you're not just here for macrame, you know this is not how I typically film. So this is a group effort right here. We're going to take the pot. It's always easiest to put it in through the top here and just kind of decide where we're going to tie a knot, because we're going to tie another gathering knot like we did at the top to kind of get this secure at the base here. So I'm just kind of deciding like roughly where I would like this plant to be hanging, because I could do a little bit lower here, or I could do a little bit higher. Pardon, I know you guys can't really see, but I could do it a little bit higher where those these knots are kind of a little bit closer to the rim of this pot. And I think that's kind of how I like it. So I'm going to tie this like this. And I'm just going to do this by memory. I can see that there's roughly like 3.5 inches here. But if I wanted to be sure, I could always use a piece of masking tape to kind of just tie around here to remember where I want to tie this knot as I pull this out, because, you know, I could mess up where I wanted to tie that knot. But in this case, you know, we don't really mind. So we're going to go in to do this last gathering knot just as we did at the top. So once again, we're going to tie the loop like this, go roughly 3.5 inches down, and start doing our little wraparound as we just did at the top of this hanger. And I will say for my bottom gathering knots, I usually use a much longer scrap. So this scrap is roughly 3 feet, I would say. And that's just so that it can join in the tail at the end to kind of make a fuller kind of like fluffy tail at the end, if that makes any sense. You'll see as we finish up this project, but I just think it's easier than as we kind of had to hide the 2 ropes that are sticking out. You'll see as I do this, of course. I think I'm talking about it a little prematurely, but it'll just save us from, you know, having to get really nitty-gritty with our project, trying to make it look as perfect as possible. So I think that's about good. I think that's good. So I'm going to take, once again, the bottom of the rope, stick it through this knot here, and then we're going to pull on the top. Get the little knot part up inside. And then now we can remove this part. Once again, just kind of use our scissors to push it in. And of course, we could also pull on the knot down here, but I don't really want to pull that other knot back out. And now we have all this extra trail right here. So I usually like to keep, I don't know, maybe like roughly like 8 inches of trail. So I'll go ahead, get this where you guys can see. I'll go ahead and find roughly that. Some people like it shorter, some people like to keep their trail longer. Depends on what you're looking for. And doesn't have to be perfect, of course. You can make it perfect if you want to. I'm gonna get a little antsy with that right there. And then last but not least, I always like to take each one individually and just give them a little bit of a twirl and let them go. Twirl, let it go. Just to kind of loosen it up and give it that classic bohemian look. But that's really all there is to it. I'll show you guys the end product, of course, but that is how I make these super simple macrame hangers. It really doesn't take long at all. Of course, if I'm not explaining everything step by step, it's a much quicker process, but yeah, that's about it. Finally, we just have to go in and make sure that our macrame plant hanger looks good with a plant inside it and of course fits the pot as we intended it to. So yes, it does. It looks fantastic. You can see here I used the 3, as you know, and it kind of looks a little asymmetrical at parts, but that's what I kind of really like about it. And of course, with a trailing plant like this, where it's just kind of spilling over one edge of the pot, I absolutely love just having it like spill through just one side of the macrame hanger. I think it looks wonderful. So that's gonna about do it for today's video. There are plenty of more ways that you can get a little bit more complicated with tying, other knots in here, using more cords to, do like square knots and spiral knots and all of that jazz. So this is just the beginning. So this is a great way to just get introduced to doing macrame, making macrame plant hangers if you are kind of familiar or not familiar at all and you just want to get started. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll see you guys in my next video. Follow me on Instagram at PhillyFoliage and subscribe to my channel. Have a great day.